The final act of the Fontaine Archon Quest was truly Genshin at its peak, but the quest also reveals so much lore that we now have enough to speculate until the traveler's arrival in Natlan. So let's get into a recap and speculative analysis of everything we've learned from Act 5, Masquerade of the Guilty. Obviously, spoilers for this quest here. If you haven't done it, do not watch this video. At the beginning of this quest, Poisson goes through a disaster, which results in the loss of several people, including Navia's close associates Malus and Silver. Until now, it wasn't clearly stated what happens to the people of Fontaine once they dissolve in primordial water, but we did know it had something to do with oceanids. Before this quest, during the trial of Vache, we had seen the consciousness of the women that disappeared because of him in the form of oceanids. It was not clearly explained why they looked that way, but we did see them in that form, and similarly, when Navia fell into the primordial sea, to the outsider it appeared that two oceanids protected her from dissolving. But from Navia's perspective, she saw all the people who had dissolved in Poisson and also Malus and Silver. And as she realized what was happening, she saw them in their true oceanid forms. Now, why this happened is later explained by Focalors when she tells us what Fontaine's original sin was. When we explore the ancient ruins with Navia and Neuvillette, we find 3 stone tablets. The art in these tablets seem to describe the prophecy, but one of them is missing, which is later found by Furina. These stone tablets reveal the history of Fontaine and why the people are labeled as sinners. A long time ago, the previous Hydro Archon Egeria noticed that her familiars, who were oceanids, wished to have a life on land. They were fascinated by the beauty of human life and wished to experience the same, and so they conveyed these desires to the Hydro Archon. Even though Egeria had the power of an Archon, she did not possess the authority to create a new form of life, a power seemingly only reserved for the heavenly principles. But she did not want to give up, so she found a way to make permanent humanoid bodies for the oceanids by appropriating the power of the planet's primordial sea. It's really interesting that Neuvillette uses the word appropriate, because this is very similar in meaning to usurp or even arrogate. The primordial one is referred to several times as a usurper, and the sustainer speaks of the arrogation of mankind. Even Focalors says what Egeria did for her people was not any different from the primordial one's creation of humans in Tevat. So I guess the greatest sin must be creation, especially if you're not the heavenly principles. Anyway, getting back to what Neuvillette was saying, Egeria then poured primordial seawater into the oceanids' blood vessels, which made them human mimics. But if these human mimics would ever come in contact with the primordial sea, their bodies would escape their humanoid forms and they would return to their original oceanid form. Since Egeria never asked the heavenly principles for permission, which I highly doubt they would have given her, to create a new human race, the Hydro Archon and her people were all considered a part of this great sin, the original sin. We do learn more about the primordial sea and the whale, but before that, let's take a look at everything Focalors told us. As you know, the trial that we tricked Furina into attending was meant to prove one thing, that Furina was not in fact the Hydro Archon. And as it turns out, not only was this trial a part of the prophecy, but it was also part of Focalors' plan. A plan to deceive the heavenly principles. When Focalors became the Hydro Archon after Egeria, the prophecy was passed on to her as her responsibility, a catastrophe that she would have to protect her people from. But as we had seen, the prophecy was going to come true. There was no way to avoid that. So Focalors had to find another way. And so she did. A way to let the prophecy come true, but also save her people. Focalors was also one of the oceanids that Egeria had turned into a human, and later chose as her successor. After Focalors became a god, she separated her divinity from her body and spirit, leaving Furina as clueless as the rest of Fontaine about her true plan. Furina was as human as Focalors used to be. During the trial, we even see her get affected by the diluted primordial water. But Focalors also cursed her, so that Furina's age wouldn't catch up to her, so that no one would realize that she was not a human, which was essential for her plan to work. So in order to make it look like the prophecy was going to come true, she made Furina act like the Hydro Archon in the prophecy. According to the curse, as long as Focalors was alive, Furina could not die. But she was also not free to live her life like she wanted to, forced to play this role until it was time. Focalors says that to deceive the heavenly principles, you must deceive yourself first. and so it was essential that Furina did not know what Focalor was planning. Focalor also revealed the truth about the Oratrice. Until now, we believe that the Oratrice was made by the Hydro Archon to pass judgments and also produce indemnitium, which was used all around Fontaine as an energy source. But in truth, the Oratrice was a device to kill the god of justice. And not just the god of justice, the Oratrice was created to take down the divine throne of the Hydro Archon as well. Over the last 500 years, Focalor had worked to accumulate indemnitium within the Oratrice. Some of it was used to provide power to Fontaine, but most of it was reserved to enact the death sentence. To get an idea of the amount of power in the Oratrice, Focalor says that if it were to be used to sustain the people of Fontaine, it could have done so for millennia. I guess that's the amount of power one would need to take down the divine throne of an Archon. And this would shake the principles established by Celestia and break through the rule of the Seven. But Focalor didn't just do this to deceive Celestia or destroy her throne. She did it because she wanted to return what rightfully belonged to the Hydro Dragon Sovereign. As I said before, Focalor believed that the heavenly principles were no different from Egeria, who they considered a sinner. The heavenly principles, just like Egeria, stole the power that the ancient dragons possessed, and she believes that this power must be returned to the rightful owner. Also, in returning this power to Neuvillette, she also ensured the safety of her people, because once the Hydro Dragon's power was complete, he could change the people of Fontaine into true humans. Focalor believed that justice lies in the process of pursuing human existence itself. So the people of Fontaine turning into humans and their right to continue existing in this world would be Fontaine's original justice. I have some more thoughts about this, but I will get to that after we talk about the whale. Now, as we saw in the quest, the giant whale Child saw in his dreams and we saw through his vision was a very real creature and was the one who would bring the flood to Fontaine as the prophecy had predicted. By the way, when we beat Narval, Neuvillette shares his dragon power with us, and that is how we are able to get the whale. When Skirk arrives, she too appears in a fashion similar to Narval, making a crack which might be similar to what young Tartaglia fell into as well. Also, the scene with Skirk. Haven't we seen that before? Someone capturing an enemy in a tiny object. I don't want to read too much into it, but it can't be a coincidence that the Sustainer was also trying to stop someone who was not from Tevat. Visitors that journey the stars together. Anyway, it turns out this whale that had literally almost caused the extinction of the Fontainians was just a part of a private training session for Skirk, which her master had organized because the whale was his pet. Skirk was impressed by the fact that the Traveler and Neuvillette were able to defeat the all-devouring Narwhal without using the power from beyond this world. Skirk's master was raising this pet and taking care of his sustenance, which was primordial seawater, which the Fontainians had in them. Skirk's master is called Sir Tlogi, also known as the Foul, probably where the Foul legacy comes from. She also mentions the Visionary, Vedelfolnir, and Rhindaughter. Apparently, Skirk's master is also like Rhindaughter, trying to pursue some sort of perfection. Now, after the Traveler and Paimon left, Skirk and Neuvillette had a separate discussion. Skirk talks about how she can now sense Neuvillette's true power. It is the authority of the primordial dragons, using which he was able to return the Fontainians into true humans. But Skirk also says that this power had something similar to a god's curse mixed in. She then goes on to ask Neuvillette that he should have the remains of the third descender on him, which confuses him. But she goes on to explain that that's what a gnosis is, remains of the third descender. She also tells Neuvillette that he should get rid of the gnosis because it is an object of misfortune, and it's better to not have it to prevent any forthcoming disasters. She then goes on to say, to live itself is a blessing, but once a person dies, the bonds he once had with this world shall all turn to curses. She doesn't explain any further and says that that is the reason why she doesn't wish to return to the surface. Also, the authority that Neuvillette received was what the heavenly principles stole from the primordial dragons. The gnosis are separate from that. They are compatible with the elements and also have the power to enhance elemental abilities. Perhaps for an Archon to wield the power of the element they govern, they would need a gnosis. It makes sense that these gnosis were made from a descender, because the third descender, just like the Traveler, would have been capable of wielding the elements. We also saw Neuvillette give the Traveler some of his own power, which wasn't difficult for the Traveler to use, so it makes sense. Neverlet also gives us some customary information about Natlan, which is that it is the nation of war, Capitano is there, and the dragons there have evolved heavily and found a way to coexist with humanity. I have so many thoughts in my head about the information that was revealed to us. To start off, the use of the word sin before Fontaine was reserved for the sinner we met with Clotar, and perhaps Rhindaughter in relation to Candria. And since sin in Fontaine was to create a new race of people, why could that not be true for the people of Candria? Think about it. The Fontainians were turned into human mimics by the primordial sea. The process worked out, but when they would come in contact with the primordial sea again, their forms would become unstable and they would turn back to what their true forms were. So what if the people of Candria were created in a similar manner? And the reason they all turned into Hilichurls and the Black Serpent Knights was because they came into contact with what was used to create them in the first place. Ideally, this should be abyssal power, because the monsters that the Kandrians turned into already existed before the cataclysm. Also, Nicole, while telling us about the prophecy, said that there are spots where the god's gaze does not fall. Kandria was known to be a nation that not only had no gods, but was also looking beyond Tevat's sky to learn knowledge and build their machines and technology. Small tangent, but Neverlet post the Archon Quest has a new vision story, which is a lot. Let's get into it. After the usurper, the primordial one, was severely wounded in the Great War of Vengeance, they had their functions ruined and could no longer use their absolute authority to suppress the original order of this world. To continue to subdue and control the resentment and loathing of the world, the usurper and the one who came after created the Gnosis together. So the order was made to be upheld, and thus did humans come to possess these 7 remembrances, and all fragments of the primordial were driven to devour each other. From that day on, whenever a person's wishes reached the heavens, the 7 overseers of the material realm were duty-bound to grant them a gift. Though they might not know nothing of who or what wish had stepped into the threshold of the sacred, the 7 Archons still had to impart a shard of their mastery to that person. Neverlet obeys no edict from the heavens, but he does acknowledge human will. So he too set aside parts of himself, as like unto the dragon treasure hoards of old, awaiting valiant humans to come and claim them. Okay, firstly, what we thought about the second who came and the primordial one was slightly different from the truth. Because there's been a long-standing theory about the second who came being the one in Celestia and not the primordial one. But considering they did a collab and built the Gnosis together, that doesn't sound like they were enemies to me. But also, it could be that they did fight initially, but later, when they saw that the primordial dragons were trying to get back the power that was stolen from them and were waging war, they maybe decided that it would be in their best interest to team up. Also, if the Gnosis are remains of the third descender, did they kill that descender to make the Gnosis? Unless it was already someone they did not consider an ally. Also, we do have a timeline of when the Archons came to be, so we can place the creation of the Gnosis and the death of the descender to that time. Also, when Paimon felt it was creepy to think about, and she was worried that the traveler would die, I also wondered, now that one of the 7 thrones is gone, and with each region the Gnosis are stolen, is the Heavenly Principles going to try to make new Gnosis now, using the traveler? Now, the next section is absolutely speculative. I do not have any proof for what I am theorizing, but these were all thoughts that came to me. I do want you to remember this as we go on, because it does get progressively less and less believable. So please do keep that in mind. Coming back to Candria, 1 year ago after the Sumeru Archon Quest, I made this video. For anyone who hasn't watched it, I basically said that the Abyss Twin isn't really the Traveler's sibling, and they were made by someone, and that's why they're not a descender. And over the last year and this quest, I'm still holding on to this theory. After doing the latest Fontaine quest, I was initially convinced that the third descender was not one of the twins. As I said before, the Archons were established around 2600 years ago with Venti, and for that, the twins would have had to come to Tevat before that, and the Traveler was sleeping for that much longer before being woken up by their twin during the cataclysm. But then I realized something. Whenever I think of Kandria, I think about the cataclysm, which happened 500 years ago. But the kingdom of Kandria has existed for way longer than that. And this is very speculative because we don't have that much information on when this kingdom originated. One of the reasons that I believe Kandria is very old is because the scribe from Salvin, which was a very, very old kingdom, had heard about a nation with no gods. This might have been at the beginning of Kandria, but it's still quite old. Kandria had sent a delegation to Enkonomia to find the book before Sun and Moon. And while this doesn't prove how old Kandria is, it must have already existed for a period of time if they had a delegation with a ruin guard to find a book. Also, if you remember, in the Wanderer's Interlude quest, we find out that the Abyss sibling was summoned to Kandria. But when did that happen? They never said when. They just said that they were summoned. Although even if the sibling was summoned back then, and they were the third descender, the cataclysm didn't happen until 500 years ago. So how would they still be around? Even in my old video, I theorized that someone made the traveler's sibling. And they made them look like that so that the traveler would follow on the same journey that they seemingly went on. At that time, I thought the real sibling was sleeping or captured. But now I just feel like, what if they're dead? Also, we literally saw the sustainer of heavenly principles take away the twin and put them in the cube. The opening of Genshin is speculated to be right after the cataclysm, when the twins were trying to run away. But the reason we believe this is because of the traveler's memories, which are inherently unreliable. I have even more speculation in this brain rot of a theory. Think about it. The twins come to Teyvat upon the summoning. Only one twin was summoned, and they wake up and go to Kandria. They perhaps even stay there for a time before the heavenly principles find out that there's another descender in Teyvat and try to go after them. At this point, the twins are separated. One is sent away, while the other is captured and used to make the Gnosis. Much later, someone makes the fake twin who can use abyssal power, who feels like Kandria is their homeland. And this homeland is much more important to them than reuniting with their sibling. I can't prove this theory, but something about this story makes me question the possibility of this. On a separate note, I do want to bring up that the Fatui collecting the remains of the third descender is quite suspicious. Are they trying to bring them back? Honestly, the quest has driven me to think that anything is possible in this story now. And while I'm dying to know what happens in Natlan, I'm also terrified for how dark things are going to become. I once thought that Genshin's story could be dark, but only to a point. But watching an Archon execute herself to get back at the heavenly principles is proof that this is only the beginning of a much darker phase of the story. That's it for my thoughts on this quest. If you enjoyed this video, please consider commenting your thoughts. Actually, even if you didn't like it, please do tell me your thoughts. If this is your first time on my channel, hi, I'm Pixie. I stream and make videos about Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. I also make lore videos sometimes. If you like the vibe here, please do subscribe. And if you wish to speak to me about lore or anything Genshin related, I stream at twitch.tv/Pixieebub. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I will see you in the next one.